Well,
tw-
this is Lieutenant Colonel Francis E. Babe Hawke. We are finished with basic training. Gone back to Arizona for a few months to continue ROTC, and we're now going to Santa Ana, California for Navigator School. Take it away.
well, actually, it wasn't for navigation school. It was to get qualified for several different things: bombardier, navigator, bomber pilot, fighter pilot, flight engineer, radio operator, or aerial gunner. And we had to take these tests, and also physicals, of course. I got a funny story to tell you about that. There was a girl that we grew up with here in Tucson by the name of Mary Gephardt.
Mm-hmm.
And her parents and our parents were very close friends. But while I was at Santa Ana and was taking my physical, we were all sitting in a hallway, and an airman came out and called me, and I had to report to the laboratory that I had flunked the test. And so I said, well, what did I flunk? And he said, well, you flunked the test for venereal disease. I said, you got to be crazy. I've never been with a woman in my life. Well, he said, you didn't get it off of a toilet seat. He said. So I reported to this laboratory, and here was Mary Gephardt.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, and when she saw me, she just started laughing because she'd put me up to it. But
she had faked it?
Huh?
She had faked it?
Oh yeah. She had seen my name and did this on purpose. But anyhow, we couldn't leave the Santa Ana Air Base, and she had married a fellow. He was a first lieutenant, and so what he did is he picked me up and put me in the trunk of his car, and we drove off the base. And when we got off the base, I got in the car and we drove down to their house to spend the evening. And after that, we came on back out to the base the next morning and had a good time. But anyhow, we took all of these tests, and I got a 9 score in all of them, and then it depended upon what they needed most. So if you had passed a particular one and they needed that most, that's where you went. So most of us, there were 22 of us out of the original 58 of us that went in, that went to the Air Corps and went to Santa Ana, California. But we were there, and once we were qualified, why then we went to Hondo, Texas. Hondo, Texas, which is about 40 miles west of San Antonio.
But so you got your 9 staying on. They needed navigators. They said you're going to go be a navigator.
Yeah.
So then you get your navigation training in Santa Ana, or you went to Hondo for that?
No, we had to go to Hondo
Hondo
for that.
Navigation training. Okay.
And Hondo was originally a little town of about 2,500, and because of the war and because of the base, it grew to 10,000. And it was the largest navigation school in the United States. It had the largest graduating classes too. We weren't the largest. We, I think, next to greatest. But anyhow, we graduated and we flew in AT-7s and AT-11s, and took aerial navigation, celestial navigation, and graduated in September of 1944.
And what instruments were you using?
Well, we were using, we had to use celestial navigation, so we had to use the, can't remember what the name of it is.
Sextant?
Sextant, yeah, regular sextant. And we had to, and so on the ground, we even had to use it to show proficiency, and we had to take so many fixes a day, all through, to get us acquainted to it. And they had platforms that were on ropes, and it kind of swayed like you being in an airplane. But that's how we learned to do celestial.
So to navigate an airplane, you had to have visual access to the outside world.
Oh yes, very
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
And later on in the B-24, that was a dome at the top,
Right.
and it was right over where the navigator was in the nose of the B-24 in my case.
Uh-huh. So you wouldn't be in the dome the whole time. You'd pop up there to take your readings
Right,
and then go back down.
And have to do the figuring. It took you about a half hour to shoot and to figure out the actual position.
Okay, so by the time you'd done it, you were a half hour away from where
Half
you were.
hour. So what you do is take Polaris first,
Uh-huh.
because you're mostly going east to west.
Uh-huh.
And you take Polaris, which gave you your latitude.
Mm-hmm.
And you took that first because it was not going to move much in that 30 minutes it took you to figure out the actual position. And then I always shot out there, Denham and Vega were my favorite stars to shoot.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And so you obviously, and you would normally, but you'd obviously have to be flying above the clouds
Yes,
to do that, but you would normally be doing that anyway.
right.
Yeah.
I know.
Okay.
Although in reciprocal aircraft you got better mileage at low altitude than you did at high altitude. Where in a jet aircraft you got better mileage at high altitude.
So would they sometimes fly under the clouds and then go above the clouds so you can get a fix and then fly back down? Did they ever do that?
No, usually we would fly at an altitude where we were above the clouds. Right.
So how long was navigation school?
Navigation school was, let's see, started in it was 4 months. Got 100 hours in the AT-7. And during that time I was promoted to PFC. Private. Did you ever make PFC, Mike?
Yeah, I'm 85.
Oh, did you? Uh-huh.
You were joined here by
And so on September 17th of 1944,
Mike and Lori. And Lori. So 100 hours.
yeah, 100 hours in the AT-7. And
In fact, Mike, show the headline there, the main headline there.
On this one?
Yeah, but then there was another one about the end of the war, I think. There we go. There we go. Piece of Last. Stars and Stripes. What's the date on that?
Date on that is Wednesday, August 15th, 1945. This is the Mediterranean edition, printed in Italy.
Okay. Cool. Okay.
of course it was over before then, before August. But that says in Japan?
I think that's the Japan one.
Yeah.
That's
this is-
Japan,
this
yeah.
is Japan.
So, did a lot of guys wash out at navigation school? I imagine some did.
No, the only time they would wash out was because of physical.
Okay.
They needed them too badly. And
Okay.
they were all qualified, mentally to complete the course. And some guys got sick, of course, flying, but that didn't wash them out. We had 3 desks in the back of the AT-7, and each one had a compass, and it was about that big around, and had a cover on it to protect it. And of course they would use that to throw up in, and we called it the Compass Club.
The Compass Club. Did you join the Compass Club?
No, I never did.
You're okay?
I was very fortunate, yeah.
Now, at this time, mentally, where were you mentally in terms of preparing to go to war and maybe die for your country?
Well, we were very anxious, of course, to, number one, get our commissions and get our wings, and then to go on to further training. In my case, we went to Westover Field, Massachusetts, for B-24. When I joined the crew, they had completed all of their training except the navigation, and that's how short they were of navigators. So we spent the whole month then doing nothing but flying and completing the navigation portion of the training for a crew. And as soon as that was over, then we went down to pick up a brand new B-24 on Long Island.
Now, were you were you thinking, maybe this wasn't an issue because you knew the war couldn't be over, but were you thinking, gee, I hope the war's not over by the time I get over there, or were you thinking, gee, it'd be kind of nice if the war were over before
No.
I got over there?
No, we were very anxious then to get over and get into combat.
So you wanted a piece of the action.
We wanted to be heroes, yeah.
Okay. Okay, and that was pretty much universal, you think?
Yeah, I don't. We had a co-pilot who was not real gung ho. In fact, I think he completed 10 missions is all. Mm-hmm. And there were only 3 officers on the crew, and we all were second lieutenants when we went overseas. Mm-hmm. And the aircraft commander and I came back as first lieutenants, and he came back as a second lieutenant. Yeah. So
which meant he was looking for excuses not to fly missions?
Exactly.
Yeah, he was sick, a lot of sick bay. And
as far as I was concerned, he was a coward.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So 4 months, and then what's the next stage after navigation school?
Went to combat crew training in Westover Field, Massachusetts, mm-hmm. Which was in the middle of Massachusetts, about 80 miles from the capital. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was on the river going north and south. Mm-hmm. Yeah. One of our crew members was a fellow by the name of Ed Deep, mm-hmm. who was from Maine, and so on a long weekend he went up to visit his family, and he came back with a gallon jug of pure maple syrup. Mm. So we all went downtown to the pancake and house and ate up the the maple syrup, which was delicious.
Did it make you sick?
Huh?
Did it make you
oh
sick?
no, it was delicious. Yeah.
So this was combat crew training. Now, were you training with the people you were going into combat with? Or
yes,
just...
we were actually a crew and had a crew number, and
okay.
This is the crew we went together to combat and flew combat, okay. Until I was chosen to be a lead navigator, and then I went to special training for that for a week, and then from then I flew on a lead crew with never flew with this crew again.
But this crew you trained with, how many were on the crew?
There were 8 of us because we didn't have a bombardier.
Okay, and can you remember how many of the names can you remember?
Well, let's see. The pilot was Alvin Drishler. The co-pilot was Myron P. Jakovitz. The flight engineer was Joe Donchen. The radio operator was Ed Deep. The Sperry ball gunner was Norb Piasecki. The tail gunner was John McKenna. One of the waist gunners was Bill Mallory. That was, and the assistant flight engineer was Hugerwurst. So we had an international. Most of the guys were from Hugerwurst and Drishler, the pilot, were from Chicago area. McKenna was from Massachusetts. Donchen was from New Jersey. Jakovitz was from Long Island. And let's see, Bill Mallory was from Missouri.
Now, by this time, had the Sperry ball gunner, that position become well known for what it became well known for?
Oh, very, very definitely, yeah. It was, the Sperry ball was pulled up on the B-24. In other words, it was inside the cabin part on takeoff and landings. But as soon as we got in the air, why they lowered it and he would climb into it, because when we tested his guns, he had to be in the Sperry ball turret to test the guns. Yeah.
So did he get? Was there any black humor with him or anything like that, or?
No, you couldn't be very big to fit in that turret, and I just don't. I could never understand why they didn't get claustrophobia in it, because it just wasn't that big, you know.
But you could kind of wonder why all of you didn't get claustrophobia in the B-24.
Well, no, the pilot and co-pilot, of course, were out in the open. They were side by side, and you could walk in between them. The navigator had a real good position, all of his own up in the front, and then bombardier was down below that over the bomb site. We had a nose turret, And on some missions, I would fly in the nose turret along with another lead navigator, and I would be the pilotage navigator at that time, where I could see on the ground and say where we were. We were over this town or this position. And that way I got to fire the guns.
Did you ever shoot anything down?
The one time that I shot and got credit for a kill was we were flying in this, and the first jets that we had came at us. And I looked, and they said said fighter coming in at 12 o'clock. I looked up, and there he was, and I just pulled the triggers, and we blew it up. And they were going to give me credit, but my guns were pointed straight at the ground. Because as we left the initial point called the IP, before the bombardier could acquire the target, I could acquire the target, and I would take my gun reticle and put on the target.
Oh, okay.
And by doing that and then tracking it, then I had degrees marked on the turret, and I could give I could acquire the target and also give the bombardier the drift. And so that was.
And so when the jet came in, that's how you were oriented, and you fired the gun straight into the ground.
Straight to the ground. Yeah.
Well, maybe you got a Jeep or something. Huh?
Yeah, maybe so. But they didn't give you credit for Jeeps.
So this is combat crew training. And how long does this last?
We were in combat crew training, let's see, for not very long, just 100. That's why I wrote all this down, because I can't remember after, what, 65 years or more.
For the record, you are about 3 months away from 89 as this conversation takes place.
Yeah, March 11th, and this is what, January 1st.
Right. 2 months away from the age of 89.
Let's see, I didn't forget anybody. John Hugervorst, Ed Deep, Norb Pisecki, Bill Mallory, and John McKenna. We went over as actually we were short 2 crew members when we went over.
You pick up 2 when you're there?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So what was this, a couple of weeks, a few weeks?
Where at?
Combat crew training.
No, it was over a month. Let's see. 11 November, let's see here. No, I don't say how much time I had here.
What was the content of the training?
Pardon, what?
What was the content of the training?
Well, it was all navigation, of course, because they'd completed all the rest. I got it down here someplace what it consisted of. No, can't find it. Reported to Westover Field on October 4th, 1944. And then 11 November, we had vacation. And then on 27 November, we left Westover Field and went to Mitchell Army Airfield in Long Island, New York, and picked up a brand new B-24L. So that was combat crew training started in 5 October 1944. So that was what, almost 2 months.
And was there, but you had each been through your separate training to learn your
As a
expertise.
navigator, yeah.
And the bombardier had been through bombardier training, and the pilot. So they brought you together as a crew. For what purpose then?
To form as a crew, to go overseas as a crew, and train as a crew, so that you got to know the people and got confidence in them and what their jobs were.
So you'd be basically flying every day?
Yeah, almost, except couldn't take off in Massachusetts until they got the fog burned off in the morning. So we normally didn't take off until about 10 o'clock.
And then you just fly a mission every day. You go here, turn around, come back,
Yeah.
that
mhm.
kind of thing.
Then we had night missions.
Uh-huh.
We had gunnery missions. I had to fire the guns,
Mm-hmm.
and so it was.
Would you do that over the water or what?
Yeah. mhm,
Over
out-
land?
yeah. mhm, yeah.
And then would they simulate problems, emergencies? Those
Oh
kind of
yeah, they
simulations?
had that all the time. Uh-huh. Yeah, they'd pull an engine and have to go through the procedure for restarting it, and
Mhm.
feathering it. And that
Could they
fun.
simulate flak?
No, can't. Don't want to do that.
That's gonna the first time you're gonna encounter that's gonna be in combat. We told you.
Yes, thank goodness.
Do they have people there who'd been in combat to talk to you?
Oh yes, the most of the guys that were training us had been in combat,
Uh-huh.
had returned from overseas, and were experienced combat pilots and navigators and so forth.
Okay.
Mhm.
And was that pretty intense? Did you feel that was pretty intense? The training?
Oh yeah, it was almost 2 months of solid flying.
Uh-huh.
Mhm.
And of course, your job was to get the plane to where it was supposed to go that day. And back.
That's right, and of course, since they had completed all the training, and this was only the navigation part, why it was very concentrated.
Mhm.
And
Okay. So you complete that and you go to Mitchell on Long Island for what purpose?
Yeah.
Is that a staging area? You pick up your new B-24?
that was to go overseas and pick up our brand new airplane.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
And how long were you there?
Just a couple of days.
And then you flew to the theater.
From there, we flew up to Goose Bay, Labrador.
Okay, so you're on your way to the theater now.
Yeah.
Okay,
mhm.
let's stop here. Take a break.